The first thing Captain Mira Sato noticed was the silence. A silence that suffocated the vastness of space, a silence that should have been as natural as breathing but now felt wrong. It pressed in from every side, a heavy weight, suffusing every corner of her starship. She stood in the bridge, eyes narrowing as she studied the flickering console in front of her. The readings were the same as before: stable orbit around the dead planet, the ship's systems intact, no sign of enemy ships. Yet, the silence remained. Her fingers hovered over the panel, and with a sharp breath, she tapped in the coordinates once more, locking the ship into a precise, unyielding orbit. The star ahead, a dim, red dwarf, pulsed weakly, the last remnant of a once glorious system, now fading. The time for action was now. Yet Mira felt something deeper in her bones, a growing sense of urgency that did not match the stillness of the universe around her. "Captain!" came the soft voice of Lieutenant Yarrick, his tone breaking through the quiet like a needle through fabric. He stood at the entrance to the bridge, his eyes trained on a set of data panels on the far side of the room. "We've received a transmission. It's encrypted, human origin." Mira snapped to attention. "Patch it through." As the screen flickered to life, the face of an old friend appeared, Commander Alara Voss, her sharp features drawn in a way that spoke of sleepless nights and a weight of knowledge she wished she didn't have. Her eyes, usually filled with quiet humor, now were sharp with an edge that sent a chill down Mira's spine. "Captain, you need to listen to me. We've discovered something." Alara's voice was steady, but Mira could hear the tremor underneath. "It's in the human genome, something they've been hiding for centuries." Mira clenched her fists around the edge of the command chair. "What do you mean?" "There's a secret buried in our biology," Alara continued, her voice tight with urgency. Something that could change everything. Something the Syndicate's been using as a weapon." Mira froze. The Syndicate. A shadow in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, its hand deep in every corner of human life, weaving a web of control through fear, manipulation, and violence. She had heard whispers, but nothing solid. She had always believed the Syndicate was a ghost, a nightmare that haunted the deepest sectors. But now, Alara was saying they had a weapon that came from them, from their own blood. "What kind of weapon?" Mira asked, her voice low, her heart beginning to thrum in her chest. "Not a weapon in the way you think," Alara replied. "It's an enhancement. A genetic modification, long hidden, that could make humans something more. It's been buried in the oldest of us, locked away until now." Mira leaned forward, her mind racing. "And the Syndicate has it? They've been manipulating us?" "It's worse," Alara replied, her voice a whisper now. "They're hunting for the ones who still carry it. They want to control it, use it to turn humanity into something else entirely." Mira's stomach tightened. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there was something else that gnawed at her, something unspoken. "What do we do now?" "We find the key," Alara said, eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and resolve. "We need to reach the archive on Nebula Station before the Syndicate does. It's all there. The truth, the solution. If we don't, they'll finish what they've started." Mira's breath caught in her throat. Nebula Station. A place long thought abandoned, drifting on the edge of forgotten space. No one dared to go near it. It was said to be cursed, a place where time itself seemed to lose its grip. To reach it would take more than just a brave crew, it would take a miracle. But then again, Mira thought miracles were what they specialized in. "We're on our way," she said, her voice firm, but inside doubt churned. Could they make it in time? Could she stop whatever the Syndicate was planning before it was too late? The transmission ended, leaving Mira alone in the stillness. The silence returned, oppressive, a weight on her chest. She stared out at the dying star, as if searching for the answer in its flickering light. "You heard her," Mira said, turning toward Yarrick, who had been standing quietly at the back of the bridge. He nodded without speaking, his face set in grim determination. "We set course for Nebula Station, full throttle," she ordered, standing and locking eyes with him. "Prepare the crew. We don't know what we'll find, but we need to be ready for anything." Yarrick hesitated for a moment before speaking. Captain, what if we're too late? Mira didn't answer immediately. She had heard the doubt in his voice. She'd felt it too. But this wasn't the time for uncertainty. They had a mission. She had to lead them through the storm ahead, no matter how impossible it seemed. We won't be too late, she said at last, her voice hard as the steel beneath her feet. We can't afford to be. The hum of the engines roared to life beneath them, a steady pulse that shook the ship's hull and filled the space with energy. Mira took one last look at the screen as the coordinates for Nebula Station blinked on the display. Her heart raced as the ship lurched into motion, the vastness of space stretching out before them. The mission had begun. But deep in her gut, Mira knew that what lay ahead would change everything. Whatever the secret in human biology was, whatever it could do, it was no longer just about survival. It was about fighting for something far greater than any of them had ever imagined. And there was no turning back now. The spark had ignited. The journey to Nebula Station had begun with a sense of purpose, a shared determination that bound Mira and her crew together. Yet, the deeper they traveled into the uncharted expanse, the more the ship seemed to fight against its own momentum, as if the very stars themselves were trying to keep them away from the station. Mira stood at the helm, her hands clenched on the console, eyes scanning the holographic maps. Nebula Station was still days away, but the closer they got, the heavier the atmosphere aboard the ship became. The crew was restless, whispers of fear passing between them like shadows in the night. Something about this mission felt wrong, unsettling in ways that words couldn't capture. Captain! Yarrick's voice cut through the tension. He was standing at the communications station, a furrow of worry etched into his face. I've been trying to get a stable connection with the station's beacon, but all I'm getting is static. It's as if someone's blocking us. Mira felt a chill creep down her spine. Static. It wasn't normal. In fact, nothing about this was normal. Any signs of interference from the Syndicate? She asked, her voice controlled, but a sense of unease tugging at her mind. Not yet, Yarrick replied, though his tone held a question that lingered between them. But it's possible we're already too close. They've been known to hide their tracks, disable communications, or even wipe out entire ships to keep secrets buried. Mira turned her gaze toward the distant stars. The darkened void ahead felt too quiet, too empty. The calm before a storm. She wasn't sure how much longer they could avoid the Syndicate's gaze. They had been hunting for a long time, always one step ahead. If they could not break through Nebula Station's defenses soon, they would be trapped. I need answers, she muttered more to herself than to Yarrick. The Syndicate can't hide forever. We're going to need more than just stealth. Yarrick stepped closer, his voice low. Captain, I've been reviewing Commander Voss's transmission. She mentioned a key. What if the key is more than just a piece of information? What if it's a person, or worse, a specimen? Mira froze. A specimen? The idea seemed ridiculous at first, but the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. The Syndicate had done horrific things to humanity's genetic legacy. Could they have been experimenting, twisting the human genome in unimaginable ways to create something else? I'll take that into consideration, Mira said, her mind already racing through possible scenarios. But first, we need to reach the station. Once we're there, we'll figure out the rest. Hours passed as the ship continued its course toward the station, but the heavy silence only deepened. The crew moved like ghosts through the corridors, eyes flicking nervously from one face to the next. The hum of the engine seemed louder now, a constant reminder of how close they were to the unknown. As Mira made her way to the observation deck, she found herself alone, staring out at the inky expanse of space. The stars appeared closer now, pinpricks of light in a vast ocean. Yet there was something off about them, something almost watchful. Her instincts screamed at her to be cautious, but there was no turning back. Mira! A voice called from behind. She turned to find Lieutenant Thorne, his face drawn and his eyes tight with concern. We've got something. A distress signal. Mira's heart skipped a beat. A distress signal. They were too far out for it to be a standard message, and given the secrecy surrounding Nebula Station, it was more likely a trap. She stepped toward Thorn, her eyes narrowing. "From who?" she asked, her voice cold. "A lone freighter," Thorn replied, pulling up the transmission. "The coordinates suggest it's right near Nebula Station." "Are they alive?" Mira asked, already knowing the answer. They had to be alive, otherwise the Syndicate would have wiped them out by now. "Yes," Thorn said. "But barely. Their systems are failing, life support is down, and they're asking for emergency assistance. I think they're being hunted." Mira turned back to the viewport, her mind calculating the risks. Helping them could give away their position to the Syndicate, but letting them die could jeopardize everything. This wasn't just a simple rescue mission, it was another piece of the puzzle, and Mira knew they needed all the pieces they could get. "We're going," she said, her voice firm. "Plot a course. Full speed ahead." As the ship turned toward the distress signal, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The closer they got, the more she felt something was wrong. She could see the faint outline of a freighter drifting aimlessly, barely holding together in the void. Its hull was scarred, blackened by what looked like weapons fire, its lights flickering like dying embers. "Prepare for boarding," Mira ordered. "No one gets left behind." The crew moved with precision, each member knowing their role. Mira could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every move they made brought them closer to Nebula Station, but also closer to the Syndicate's reach. As the docking bay doors slid open, Mira led the team into the freighter. The air was thick, stale, and heavy with the scent of burning metal. The corridors were dark, broken only by the faint, dying glow of emergency lights. There was no sign of life, no sounds of footsteps, no voices, nothing. They made their way through the vessel, weapons drawn, senses on high alert. Mira's breath came in short bursts, and every step felt like they were intruding on something far older and darker than they could understand. Finally, they found them. The survivors. Two figures, huddled in the corner of a darkened control room, their faces gaunt, eyes wide with fear. One was human, barely, a young man whose skin seemed to have the pallor of someone who hadn't seen the sun in months. The other was something else. Mira's stomach tightened as she studied the second figure. It was humanoid, but its features were twisted, unnatural. Its skin was a shade of gray, the eyes too large, too dark, as though staring through her rather than at her. It was breathing, barely, but there was something about it that was off, wrong, like a mistake in a long-forgotten code. "Who are you?" Mira asked, her voice cold. The man looked up, his eyes wide with terror. We were part of the project," he whispered, his voice hoarse. They're coming for us. They want him back. The Syndicate, they'll do anything to get him." Mira's heart dropped into her stomach. The key wasn't a piece of information. It was here. And the Syndicate would stop at nothing to reclaim it. The freighter drifted in silence, a ghost in the black void of space, its hull barely holding together. The crew of the Starlight had secured the survivors and were now preparing for a hasty exit, but Mira could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. The creature, the one they had called the Key, still lay unconscious in the holding bay, its presence unsettling and unnatural. The man, Tobias, was the only one who could speak of its origins, and his words echoed in Mira's mind, unanswered. "They're coming for him," Tobias had said in a voice that cracked with fear. "The Syndicate won't stop. They'll use him to finish what they started." But what had they started? What was the Syndicate hiding in the depths of human biology? Mira wasn't sure what she was up against, but she knew it was worse than anything she'd imagined. The ship's engines hummed softly beneath her feet as the crew worked, their movements sharp and purposeful, but even the steady rhythm of the ship could not drown out the unease that simmered between them. Every creak of the hull, every flicker of the lights, felt like a warning. "I don't like this, Captain," Yarrick said from his post at the communications console. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of shared concern. "We've got incoming ships. 2, maybe 3. They're not Syndicate, but they're carrying enough firepower to make things difficult. Where are they coming from? Mira asked, her voice tight. They've been tailing us since we picked up the distress signal, Yarrick replied. We're not alone out here. I don't know how they found us, but it's no coincidence. Mira's mind raced. Who are they? Pirates, most likely, Yarrick said, glancing at the sensors. They'd been known to target ships in this sector, too far out for the Syndicate to patrol, but close enough to the station to be dangerous. Mira stood up from her seat and walked over to the viewport. The stars were distant pinpricks, their light so cold, so far away. Everything about this mission had felt off from the start, but now, with enemies on all sides and the key, the creature, hidden in the hold, Mira knew they were on the precipice of something far more deadly than pirates. We can't fight them, Mira said, her voice calm, though the storm inside her was anything but. We need to get to Nebula Station before these pirates find us. They'll be after the key just like the Syndicate. Agreed, Yarrick said, standing and locking eyes with Mira. But Captain, if we're going to make it to the station, we'll need to outrun them. We don't have the firepower to stand up to a full-fledged attack. We won't fight, Mira said, her mind already racing through options. But we'll give them a reason to think we're not an easy target. Get ready to jump to warp as soon as we can. As the crew scrambled to their stations, Mira turned to Tobias, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, his eyes fixed on the creature in the containment room. He looked more haunted than before, his face gaunt, his eyes empty. Tobias, Mira said, her tone soft but commanding. We're running out of time. What can you tell me about him? About it? You've seen what it is. How does the Syndicate plan to use him? Tobias's gaze flickered up, his eyes full of dread. They think they can control him. He's human in a way, but he's not. He's the product of years of experimentation, genetic modifications, enhancements. They've been trying to create something beyond human. But they lost control. He's not a weapon they can wield, not the way they think. He's something else. Something else? Mira repeated, her mind struggling to grasp what he meant. He's dangerous, Tobias said, his voice trembling. But not in the way you think. He's not violent. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. But the Syndicate, they've been playing with fire. They think they can use his abilities, turn him into a living weapon, but they don't understand what he really is. Mira leaned in, urgency flooding her veins. What is he? What exactly is he capable of? Tobias hesitated, his eyes flickering to the creature, still unconscious in its containment unit. It's like a trigger. He doesn't just have enhanced abilities. He can manipulate the human genome, rewrite it, change how we evolve. If they unlock that potential, they could turn humanity into whatever they want. They could reshape us, remake us in their image. And if they succeed, he swallowed hard, his throat working. Humanity as we know it will cease to exist. The words hit Mira like a physical blow. She felt her stomach twist with the weight of it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the future of all mankind, how they would evolve, what they would become. And the Syndicate, with all its power and cruelty, wanted to control it. But Mira wouldn't let that happen. We won't let them control him, Mira said firmly, her voice hardening with resolve. We'll protect him, get him to Nebula Station, and figure out how to stop this madness. Before Tobias could respond, the ship's alarms blared. The sound was deafening, filling the room with a sense of imminent danger. Mira's heart raced as she turned to Yarrick, who was now furiously working at his console. They've engaged, Yarrick said, his voice taut with urgency. They've locked onto us. Mira's mind raced. The pirates had made their move. They were already too close. There was no time to waste. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, she barked. Initiate warp. Full power. The ship lurched as the engines roared to life, but as they surged forward, the freighter's sensors blared again, this time, a warning more deadly than any before. Captain? Jarek's voice was urgent. They're locking weapon systems on us, some kind of pulse weapon, If they fire, they'll disable our engines. Mira's pulse quickened. They were moments away from being crippled, and once that happened, they would be sitting targets for the pirates. She had only one choice. They had to break free now. Activate the emergency thrusters, Mira ordered, her voice sharp as steel. Push us through. Now! As the ship shuddered beneath them, Mira held her breath. She could feel the tension in every creaking joint, in every heartbeat. This was it, the breaking point. If they didn't make it through this, they wouldn't make it to Nebula Station. And if they didn't get there soon, the Syndicate would claim the creature. Humanity's fate would be sealed. The Starlight surged forward, the pulse of its engines like a lifeline in the darkness. But Mira knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back. The war for humanity's future had already begun. And it was a war they would fight, no matter the cost. The Starlight shook violently as it tore through the blackness of space, its engines roaring in overdrive, pushing every last ounce of power into the warp drive. Mira could feel the vibrations thrumming beneath her feet, each jolt an urgent reminder of how close they were to the edge. The pirates, relentless in their pursuit, were gaining fast. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut through. And yet Mira knew this was only the beginning. Brace for impact! Jarek's voice cut through the chaos, his hands flying over the controls as the ship rattled again, warning sirens blaring across the comms. Mira gripped the armrests of her chair, eyes fixed on the view screen. The stars smeared across the blackness, a blur of light and shadow as they raced toward Nebula Station, her only hope of surviving this nightmare. How much longer? Mira called over her shoulder to Jarek, her voice steady despite the rising pressure. We're close, Captain, but they're locking their weapons on us. If we don't break free, we're done for, Jarek replied, his voice tinged with desperation. Suddenly, the ship lurched forward, and Mira's body was pressed hard into the seat. The ship's engines screamed in protest, but it didn't matter. The pirate ships were closing in. Target the lead ship, Mira ordered, her eyes hard as stone. We can't let them catch us. With a grim nod, Jarek began to pull up the targeting systems. The ship's cannons hummed, coming to life as the targeting lock was initiated. A flicker of blue light shot from the Starlight's weapons array, tearing through space, but the pirate ships scattered at the last moment, evasive maneuvers expertly timed. Damn it, they're too fast! Jarek cursed, frustration mounting. Mira's mind was already running through options, desperation fueling her instincts. They couldn't outrun them forever. The Syndicate's men weren't the only ones who had been tracking the Starlight. Get ready to deploy the decoy, Mira said, her voice ice-cold. The decoy. A last-ditch effort to draw fire away from the ship, an illusion of vulnerability that could fool the enemy into thinking they'd scored a hit. It was a risky move, but with the pirates closing in, they had no choice. She had to buy them time, and this was the only way. Deploying now, Jarek responded, his fingers already tapping the keys with practiced precision. On the view screen, a holographic projection of a ship, identical to the Starlight in every detail, flickered into existence. It drifted ahead of them, caught in the pirates' sights. The pirate ships, momentarily fooled, opened fire, their weapons pounding against the decoy ship. Mira could feel the heat of the blast waves as they impacted the illusion. Now. Engage the warp drive. Full power! Mira barked. The Starlight surged forward as the decoy continued to take the blows, a temporary distraction, keeping the pirates' focus away from their true target. Mira watched as the decoy shimmered in the distance, a crumpled, burning wreck in the wake of the pirate fire. But they were free. For now. The stars around them blurred as the ship sped toward Nebula Station, the hum of the engines growing more distant as they pushed past the battle zone. Mira leaned back in her seat, her breath steadying, but her mind still racing. They had made it, but they weren't out of danger yet. Status report, she called, trying to bring order to the chaos. We've broken through, Jarek replied, his voice a little more controlled now. The pirates are still on the other side, but we've got a good lead. Nebula Station is just ahead. Mira exhaled, the relief temporary. She turned her attention to the creature, the key, still unconscious in the holding bay. Tobias had been right. He wasn't human, but he wasn't a weapon either. He was something more, something the Syndicate had long coveted. They needed him, but the real question was whether humanity needed him, or whether the Syndicate's experiments would lead to a new dawn, or the final fall of the human race. The comms crackled, pulling Mira from her thoughts. "This is Commander Voss," came Alara's voice, clear and calm despite the situation. "We're receiving your signal, Starlight. Prepare for immediate docking. We've got to get you inside before the Syndicate arrives." Mira's heart jumped. Nebula Station. Their refuge, their final chance for answers. But the Syndicate wouldn't give up easily. "They're coming," Mira murmured, almost to herself. "I can feel them. They always come," Alara responded, a tightness in her voice. "But we have one advantage now, we know what they're after. And that's something we can use." The ship slid into the docking bay with practiced ease, the massive doors of Nebula Station grinding open, revealing a cavernous interior. Inside, a labyrinth of steel corridors stretched into darkness, echoing the silence of forgotten time. The hum of the station's energy systems was a welcome sound after the chaos of the last few hours. The crew began to disembark quickly, their steps quick and purposeful. As Mira stepped off the ship, her boots clicking against the cold floor of Nebula Station, she felt a sharp pang of uncertainty. This place, abandoned for decades, was filled with secrets, secrets that could change everything. But as she looked back at the ship, back at the creature they had brought with them, she knew this was their last shot. They had the key, and now they had to unlock its potential. But the question remained, what would humanity become once they did? The sound of heavy boots approaching snapped Mira back to reality. Alara appeared, her face grim. Behind her, a small team of scientists, technicians, and military officers, all ready to handle what the key would bring. Mira felt her pulse quicken as Alara met her gaze. "We need answers," Alara said simply, as if the weight of the situation didn't need to be spoken. "Now we find out if we've been right, or if the Syndicate's been playing us all along." Mira nodded, the tension in her chest building again. This was it. The moment of truth. As they made their way deeper into the station, the weight of the creature's potential pressed down on her. They had crossed the point of no return, and there was no going back. At that moment, Mira realized something fundamental about the battle they were about to face. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about fighting for their lives. It was about fighting for what they were to become. And, as she looked at the creature that had triggered this journey, Mira understood, the fate of humanity was about to change forever. The station's lights flickered to life as they entered the heart of Nebula Station, and the door to the deepest chamber opened. Inside, the answers waited.